No one knew what was inside those containers, not the workers, not the firefighters. Minutes later, that hidden danger turned a routine fire into a massive explosion. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments below. In August 2015, something happened in China that could not be hidden, no matter how controlled the information was. A massive explosion shook an entire city, lighting up the night sky and leaving behind a scene that looked almost unreal. It happened in the port of Tianjin, one of the busiest and most important shipping hubs in the country. This port was often called the gateway for imported cars into China. Nearly 80% of foreign vehicles pass through this location before reaching customers. Surrounding the port were major industrial zones, including assembly plants connected to global automotive brands. It was a place built for efficiency, speed, and constant movement. But hidden within this fast-moving system was something far more dangerous. In the middle of the port stood a large storage facility operated by a company called Ruihai Logistics. On paper, it specialized in handling hazardous materials, chemicals that required strict safety protocols and careful monitoring at all times. The warehouse covered tens of thousands of square meters. Containers filled with volatile substances were stacked across the site. Under normal circumstances, such materials would be stored far away from populated or industrial areas. But this facility was positioned right in the center of active port operations. The reason behind that location raised serious questions later. The company had strong connections to local officials and port management. Those connections appeared to help secure a highly valuable and unusually central piece of land for storing hazardous goods. On the evening of August 12th, everything seemed routine. Workers continued their shifts, trucks moved in and out, and containers were loaded and unloaded as usual. But inside one of those containers, a silent chain reaction had already begun. Due to heat and environmental conditions, a substance called nitrocellulose began to destabilize. This material, when dry, is extremely flammable. Without proper temperature control and handling, it can ignite on its own. And that is exactly what happened. A small fire started inside the container. At first, it was barely noticeable, but within minutes, flames spread to nearby containers. The fire grew quickly, feeding on the materials stored around it. Thick smoke began rising into the night sky. Emergency services were called almost immediately. Firefighters arrived on scene, prepared to control what appeared to be a standard industrial fire. What they did not know was that they were facing a much more dangerous situation. The responders had no clear information about the exact chemicals stored at the site. This lack of transparency would prove critical. Acting on standard procedure, they began using water to suppress the fire. However, some of the chemicals present react violently with water. Among them was calcium carbide, a substance that produces a highly flammable gas when it comes into contact with moisture. As water was applied, that gas began to form. Moments later, the situation escalated dramatically. A powerful explosion tore through the area. The blast was strong enough to destroy nearby structures and send shockwaves across the port. It marked the first major detonation. But this was only the beginning. The initial explosion triggered a chain reaction involving other stored materials. Among them was ammonium nitrate, a compound widely used in industry, but known for its explosive potential under certain conditions. Seconds after the first blast, a second, far more powerful explosion occurred. This one was massive. It released energy comparable to several tons of TNT, creating a fireball visible from kilometers away. The force of the explosion was so powerful that it was detected by seismic instruments. Buildings across the area began to shake, almost like during a small earthquake. Many windows broke throughout the city as the shock wave moved outward from the port. From above, satellites recorded a bright flash of light at the moment of the explosion. It was strong enough to be visible from orbit. People on the ground later described it as a sudden burst of light, followed by a deep and distant wave moving through the air. Within seconds, the port area changed completely. Large containers were lifted and thrown aside. Vehicles lost stability and were pushed out of place. Several parts of the infrastructure suffered heavy damage and were no longer usable. Rows of brand new cars waiting for distribution were engulfed in flames. Many were completely destroyed before they ever reached their destinations. The scale of material loss was enormous. Emergency crews attempted to respond, but the situation was extremely unstable. Fires continued to burn, and the presence of unknown chemicals made it too dangerous to approach certain areas. For nearly 2 days, the fires continued. There was little that could be done to fully control them. The blaze eventually subsided on its own, leaving behind a heavily damaged and hazardous environment. In the aftermath, the scale of the disaster became clear. Hundreds of people were affected. Many lost their lives, including a significant number of firefighters who had been among the first to respond. Thousands more were injured, and entire neighborhoods were impacted by the blast wave. Buildings far from the site suffered broken windows and structural damage. Investigations quickly focused on the storage facility itself. Questions were raised about safety protocols, chemical handling procedures, and regulatory oversight. It became evident that several safety regulations had not been properly followed. Hazardous materials had been stored too close together and in conditions that increased the risk of ignition. There were also concerns about documentation. Some reports suggested that the exact inventory of chemicals at the site was not accurately recorded or disclosed. This lack of information had a direct effect on the emergency response. Without clear knowledge of the materials on site, the teams were working in uncertain conditions. As a result, their actions unintentionally caused a chemical reaction that made the situation more dangerous. The influence of local connections soon became a focus of the investigation. Officials looked into how the company received approval to operate in such a central and sensitive area within the port. In the months that followed, several people were held responsible for what had happened. Legal steps were taken and new safety rules were introduced to reduce the risk of similar incidents in the future. The disaster became a turning point in how hazardous materials were managed in major industrial zones across the country. It also highlighted the importance of transparency in emergency situations. Clear information can make the difference between containment and escalation. Experts around the world studied the event, comparing it to other industrial disasters involving similar materials. The explosion in Tianjin served as a reminder that even modern systems can fail when safety is compromised. Even small mistakes can grow over time. When they build up, they can turn into something much bigger. And in the end, the result can be serious. This event also showed something important. Dangerous materials need careful storage, they need constant checks, and they require clear communication at every step. Today the area has been rebuilt. Everything looks different now. but the memory of that night is still there. It remains a strong example of what can happen when risks are ignored. For many people, this was more than an accident. It became a lasting lesson, a moment that changed how people see industrial safety. Safety rules exist for a reason. They are there to prevent situations like this. When they are ignored, the impact can spread far beyond one place. The Tianjin explosion remains one of the most significant industrial disasters of the 21st century. Not because it was unpredictable, but because it was preventable. And that is what makes the story truly unforgettable.